BibleWorm, BibleWorm, reading the Bible with BibleWorm.
Welcome to BibleWorm, getting to the core of the biblical text. I'm Dr. Amy Robertson, Director of Lifelong Learning at Congregation Or Hadash in Sandy Springs, Georgia.
And I'm Dr. Robert Williamson, Professor of Religious Studies at Hendrix College and the founding pastor of Mercy Community Church in Little Rock. We're here every week to discuss the biblical text, both as biblical scholars and as people of faith, one Jewish and one Christian.
This week, we read Luke chapter 2, verses 41 to 51, the story of Jesus as a 12-year-old sitting in the temple and learning with the community leaders. We shower Luke with love for including this story of adolescence, this awkward in-between time between the passivity and infinite possibility of babyhood and the full strength and differentiation of adulthood. We watch the tween Jesus push away from Mary and Joseph like the side of a pool, but then swim back to hold on again. We draw out this model of community learning where a 12-year-old's questions and answers are taken seriously. And we wonder, is this whole thing the biblical precedent for the movie Home Alone? Thanks for joining us. Hey, Bobby.
Hey, Amy, how are you this week?
I am doing well. So this week, we pick up the text still in Luke chapter 2.
Yeah.
We are reading verses 41 to 52. Not a super long text, which is nice to be able to slow down and really dive in deep.
Yeah.
So let's go ahead and dive in. You ready?
I think so, yeah.
All right. I will read verses 41 to 45. Now, every year, his parents went to Jerusalem for the festival of the Passover. And when he was 12 years old, they went up as usual for the festival. When the festival was ended and they started to return, the boy Jesus stayed behind in Jerusalem, but his parents did not know it. Assuming that he was in the group of travelers, they went a day's journey. Then they started to look for him among their relatives and friends. When they did not find him, they returned to Jerusalem to search for him. One of my kids asked me yesterday if I thought the plot of Home Alone could really happen.
Yeah.
This is like the biblical Home Alone.
It totally is. Yeah,
You
I love
leave on
that.
a trip and there's so much chaos you have forgotten you don't realize your child's not with you.
Yeah. Yes, I love that. That analogy is so perfect. Yeah, it's amazing. I love that the text kind of takes the time to sort of help you understand why that's even possible, right?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Because they're traveling with a group. They've traveled, 80, 85 miles from Galilee all the way down to Jerusalem. They're with their friends. Jesus is probably hanging out with the other boys, or that's what they think is happening. And so It takes them a day to realize it, because I guess it's not until they're getting ready to spend the night and they're gathering around for their family meal or whatever that they're like, oh my goodness, where's Jesus? Yeah.
Yeah. We have to get back from Paris to New York. Yeah.
Yeah. It would make me so much happier if there were like bumbling thieves who are trying to...
I mean, there may have been the text. Maybe there's a midrash about that somewhere.
Yeah. Jesus spreading marbles on the floor of the temple or whatever.
Shaving for the first time. I know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, this is a scary text. If you try to get your head around what it was like for Mary and for Joseph, you're a day's journey. I don't quite know how far that would be, but you would guess. It's a day's journey. You're 10 or 15 miles away. You've been traveling for a full day. You left your kid in Jerusalem at Passover.
Mm-hmm. So we've talked about sort of there being a crowd of their friends and relatives and people who are known to them that they're traveling with. But there are also a lot of other people.
Yeah.
Theoretically, at least, people are making this pilgrimage to the temple from all over Israel.
So Passover was a pilgrimage festival.
Yeah.
And so everybody, was the expectation that anybody who could sort of should come to Jerusalem for those three festivals?
Yes.
Do you think there's any significance to the fact that this is Passover in particular?
In that, the last dinner, the Last Supper. Sorry, the last dinner.
That's funny how those two words normally mean kind of the same thing, but calling it the last dinner really does kind of change.
Doesn't sound right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's sort of throughout the association of Jesus with Passover and Jesus as the as the Paschal lamb, it makes a lot of sense that this would be happening at Passover. Do you
Yeah, I
see
think-
something sort of deeper in that than what I just said?
No, I was really just curious what you would say about it. I think that's a good observation, that this text in some ways kind of brackets with the last time Jesus comes to the temple is also at Passover. And so in some sense, this is sort of foreshadowing that, and sort of invites a comparison of those two stories. But other than that, I don't know, like if this would have this have been the same story if it had taken place at Pentecost, and I kind of think so. Like, I'm not sure that the Passover part of it really plays that much into this story, as much as it sort of starts this kind of conversation across the gospel, as you were pointing out.
Yeah. Do you have any thoughts, at least at this point in the reading, about why it's important to include a story of Jesus as a tween in here? That seems significant to me, that it doesn't just go from baby to adult. It gives us this sort of awkward tweeny, teeny years.
Yeah.
I don't know. Do you have any thoughts yet, or do you want to hold on to that question?
I mean, that's a really interesting question. And Luke is definitely paying attention to these kind of ages and stages of development sort of thing. And so we had the kind of, even when he was an infant, we had the rites of passage of circumcision and purification that took place sort of at the beginning of his family life. The age of 12 is a significant age for a number of reasons that I want to ask you about in a minute, where Jesus is transitioning in some way or another from being a child to being a young adult, I guess. And then we're going to get his baptism in the next chapter. And so these sort of seem to be marking the major sort of transitions of Jesus's life. Mm-hmm. Now, I don't know exactly why, Matthew and Mark and John all tell the story without having any of these sort of Jesus' early life stories. But it seems to me like the Gospel of Luke is concerned to show us Jesus' development, and concerned to show us Jesus' development within an observant Jewish family. Mm-hmm. So in this text, they came to Passover as was their custom, right? So we're to envision like every year they're doing what they're told to do. Like they're doing the practices of their faith. They're coming to Jerusalem. They're a devout family. Jesus is raised that way. We get the sense that Jesus, he makes this journey every year. And so that seems to me to be important to Luke, to say Jesus was raised in, grew up in a fairly traditional Jewish upbringing. Mm-hmm. Did you have thoughts about that, the tween Jesus?
I mean, my thought is that as a baby, when Jesus is a baby, you can sort of project all kinds of hopes and dreams onto the baby. And, you love babies in a way that's very all-encompassing and appropriately controlling. The baby's not going to do things on its own for the most part. But then there's this process by which that helpless, perfect baby who can be everything to everybody because you can just project whatever you want onto the baby starts to gain some autonomy.
Yeah.
And I mean, speaking from a parenting perspective or a teaching perspective, it's hard. Like it's a transition. It's a little painful. And sort of for every wonderful thing that you see the child is, you also see like, oh, my child is not going to be a famous figure skater or a like, whatever, you get to know this specific child better. And so I just love that Luke includes that journey for Jesus and doesn't just take us, from this perfect baby that's really largely a symbol because a baby can't, do much on its own, and then take us to the sort of, quote unquote finished product when Jesus has really come into his own. He gives us this glimpse into this intermediary, somewhat messy period in our lives where we're opening some doors and closing others and stepping on toes and, I don't know, figuring out how to be in the world. I love it. I love that this is in here.
Yeah, I really love that. I appreciate that description so much. And, this is also starting, I appreciated this, especially the word differentiation that you used in there, that this, I really think is part of what's happening in this text is Jesus has been sort of, identifiable with his family. And by the end of this story, there's going to be some tension with his family. Mm-hmm. But here in this text, there's this kind of like, yes, I still belong to my family, but also there's this other thing that's kind of unfolding. And this really is a sense of Jesus differentiating the childhood Jesus from the adult Jesus who is yet to be.
Yeah.
What do you make of the specific age 12 years old? I feel like that is not an accidental detail. Do you have any thoughts about, like, how should we think about 12?
Thoughts about the age 12? Well, I was going to ask you, okay, speaking as a modern person in your own life experience, complete this sentence. 12 is the age for what?
Here's what I will say. I was cool until I through the age of 11. And then starting with the age of 12, I have never been cool since. And the way that I think about that is, like, until you're 11, it's like imaginative, like, just sort of, you're like a playful kid. And then somehow, it's probably related to puberty, but somehow at the age of 12, like in the 6th grade, there's this, like, shifts to, like, okay, now there's more, like, responsibility, or, like, you're supposed to be, like, conscious of your image, or you're supposed to, like, be interested in certain kinds of things that kids aren't interested in anymore. And so that's my association with 12, is, like, that was the moment that all my friends went from, like, being kids to, like, being adults. And I made it eventually, more or less. But it took me like a little while. Yeah, what do you think of? You work a lot with 12-year-olds these days.
I work with so many 12-year-olds, yes. So a big part of my job is B'nai Mitzvah tutoring, which is I spend many hours every day with 12-year-olds. And this is actually one of the questions that we ask them when they start the process. We sort of have this little exercise where we say, in your own life, country, moment, 5 is the age for what? What do you associate with being 5? What do you associate with being 10? What do you associate with being, I don't think we do 12, we do 13. And, sort of go through different ages and stages of life. And they also associate this time period with increased responsibility and stress. But the reason that we frame it that way is there's a text in Pirkei Avot, which is a 2nd century Jewish text, that goes through a set of ages and tells you, at least in that time and context, what 5 is the age for, and 10 is the age for, and 13 is the age for. And so in that text, it says 5 is the age for studying scripture, 10 for Mishnah, and 13 for mitzvot. So the idea is that once you know what's in scripture fairly well, then you get to sort of level up and see, okay, now what do we understand about these texts? What do we understand about these teachings? And there's sort of another level. And then at age 13, there is this, it says for mitzvot, there's a sense that you're responsible for yourself. Like, you're responsible for keeping the Jewish law yourself. Like, a sense that when the child is 13, they really are responsible for their acts.
So if you take that framework and apply it to this text, and I mean, obviously we're a couple centuries apart,
before that was written, so yes.
And we don't know how standard practices were and so on. But at the age of 12, this would not be yet the age of bar mitzvah for Jesus. This would be between the age of beginning to understand the interpretations of the tradition and a year away yet from actually being a bar mitzvah. And so it's in that sort of transitional phase. I like that. So in that sense, also like a tween, like he's in that sort of like between 10 and 13, you're in the process of going from being a kid, interpretation, mitzvot, and now you're an adult. And Jesus is right in that sort of gray period in the middle.
Yeah. And if we imagine that there was some kind of bar mitzvah at 13, which we don't, I mean, the bar mitzvah ceremony is like a medieval thing. So we have to be careful not to project that all the way back. But yeah, I mean, there are years of study and preparation for that. It's not like it just, happens automatically. So it would make sense that at 12, you are on a path. You're on a path.
Yeah. That's interesting.
So moving forward then, picking up in verse 46. After 3 days, they found him in the temple, sitting among the teachers, listening to them and asking them questions. And all who heard him were amazed at his understanding and his answers. I want to pause there, even though that was a really short reading, because this is like the big moment. I mean, they've been searching Jerusalem. Yeah. Now it says they returned to Jerusalem, so it took them a day to travel back.
Yeah.
And then another 3 days. I mean, these poor parents must have been absolutely panic-stricken.
Yeah.
And they find him in the temple.
Yeah, I think that's right. In my mind, there's some ambiguity about exactly how much time has passed since they left Jerusalem the first time. I think that I mean, I think the shortest time period would be 3 days. So they left, and 3 days after they left, they found him. So a day out, a day back, and a day looking. Mm-hmm. Or I think you were kind of reading it as a day out, a day back, and 3 days of looking, which I think is also a reasonable reading of the text. So we're somewhere between 3 and 5 days that they have been missing Jesus.
Okay, and so they find him sitting among the teachers, listening to them and asking them questions.
Yeah.
Sort of what nuance does this, well, I mean, not even nuance, because we haven't really met Jesus as really an actor yet. Like up to now, he's been a baby and he's been acted upon. This is really the first thing that he has done.
Yeah, that's right.
What do you make of this being the first act of Jesus's that we read about?
Yeah, 46 and 47 read slightly awkwardly together to me. Because when I just read 46, they found him sitting among the teachers, listening and asking questions, or in the CEB, putting questions to them, which sounds a little more assertive.
Yeah.
But I sort of have pictured Jesus as in a student role here, as gathering the wisdom of the elders. And, so I love that image of he is coming into his own. He's really curious about this tradition he's been raised in. He's ready to kind of learn more than he has been taught. And so he's just taken up a position among the officials of the tradition, and he's learning from them. But then in verse 47, everyone who heard him was amazed by his understanding and his answers. So it's just kind of interesting, like right on this edge of, is he a student of the teachers, or is he demonstrating his authority that goes beyond the teachers?
That's such an interesting perspective to bring to it, and I really appreciate that. I mean, I guess I have two thoughts about it. One is that at least in modern Judaism, the way that we talk about this kind of group learning is both the student and the teacher would say, I am learning with such and such. Like you learn with, it's not that one person teaches and one person learns the teaching.
Yeah.
There's at least in an ideal sense, an exchange that by pulling apart the text together, we are all learning from the process. I don't know. I think it's possible to be working together and both have lots of questions and also have answers that are genuinely amazing and compelling to the people that you're with.
Yeah, I think that's right. It's just so interesting to me that the text sort of focuses on the questions, not the answers, but the people are focused on the answers. Like they're amazed by the answers. It's just the way that that's worded is interesting to me. The other thing that I love about this part of this text is that, there's going to develop a tension between Jesus and the teachers of the tradition in this text and in all the gospel texts. But here it's not that. Here it seems like a respectful kind of it's a back and forth. Jesus is learning, Jesus is questioning. And so we have this moment in this text. It's a really nice moment where Jesus is taking up his position within the tradition, doing the things of the tradition, interacting in this tradition in ways that, the teachers let him sit there and ask him questions, it seems like for 3 days. Like they took this kid seriously, which I think is, I don't know if, a bunch of Bible PhDs were sitting around and a 12-year-old kid came up and started talking to us, I don't know how many of us would just let the kid hang around, Yeah. And so it says something about the nature of the religious leaders that they welcome this kid into their midst. So in my mind, this is sort of this moment of kind of like everything is as it should be here.
Yeah.
And it starts to get tense here not too long from now, but right at this moment, Jesus is really positioned within his tradition in a positive way.
I love that. And that being positioned in a positive way is really active and interactive, and that he's sort of fully a part of the community that wrestles with different teachings and sort of figures out what they think the Jewish people ought to be doing.
Yeah.
No, I love that. So picking up then in verse 48. When his parents saw him, they were astonished, and his mother said to him, "Child, why have you treated us like this? Look, your father and I have been searching for you in great anxiety." He said to them, "Why were you searching for me? Did you not know that I must be in my father's house?" But they did not understand what he said to them. Then he went down with them and came to Nazareth and was obedient to them. His mother treasured all these things in her heart. And Jesus increased in wisdom and in years and in divine and human favor. It's so hard not to read this text just as a parent.
Yeah.
What is the matter with you, child?
Yeah, I love that it starts there, like, what's wrong with you? And then it ends up with, she cherished it in her heart. And how often those two kinds of things go together. Like, he has done something that she didn't know he could do. And that, like, scared her and then amazed her. And that's such a true to life kind of thing.
Especially with that lack of understanding in the middle of it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, it is really sort of true to life in some ways.
Yeah.
So when Jesus says to his parents, "Why were you searching for me? Did you not know that I must be in my Father's house?"
Yeah.
The text tells us they don't understand.
Yeah.
Does that surprise you that they don't understand? Can you tell me more about what you think they don't understand?
It does surprise me. And, the way that that's phrased, Mary says, "Your father and I have been worried." So she has put the word father on the table. Yeah. And Jesus has taken that up and said, "I've been here with my father this whole time." And so Jesus is very strongly contrasting, I think, the earthly father and the heavenly father in this text. And it's not exactly that he has said, "Joseph's, you're not my dad," right? But there is this clear, like, I don't belong to Joseph in the way that other kids belong to their fathers. Like, I have another father who is my true father. Mm. It is surprising because, we just read all these angels, like, the whole angel army has showed up, and like, just like we've gotten these repeated observations that Jesus doesn't belong to Joseph in the way that a child typically belongs to their father. And so, I don't know, I've always wondered, like, that was a while ago, right? That was 12 years ago.
Yeah.
And maybe I don't know, not that they had forgotten about it, but that they, like, you've lived 12 years of your life, and the kids seem just normal. And, like, suddenly this theme is emerging again. Yeah. And you're like, oh, I didn't, like, we just gotten used to our life without thinking about that. And suddenly we're going to have to think about that again. What do you do with that?
I love the things that you're pulling out of those verses, and asking us as readers to really remember it's been 12 years and we don't know. We don't know if they've told Jesus anything about anything related to his conception or birth. Oh, yeah. Presumably not. Yeah. I don't know. That would be a weird conversation.
That would be a weird conversation. And you could imagine them sort of saying, like, we're not going to have this conversation with Jesus until he's old enough to handle it.
Yeah.
And maybe they didn't think that they had gotten to that. Yeah. Like, we're just at 12. We're not at the age
at the age of understanding.
Yeah.
The phrase "your father's house" is one that, or the house of your father, is common in the biblical text.
Yeah.
Referring to your earthly father, your father, your lineage, and so it can be a literal house, or it can be, referring to your lineage. I can't think of a word other than lineage. Yeah. But here he's using the same words in a different way.
Yeah. It's interesting, right? Because in the Greek, the word house isn't actually there. It's...
Really?
Yeah. It's in tois tu patrosmu, in the unstated things of my father. So the word tois, which is, the article, is being used by itself. So it's literally in the things of my father. And so there's a debate about how we ought to read that. You could read it as in my father's affairs. So, like, I'm sitting here with these teachers and we're talking about heavenly stuff, right? We're into God's business. Or you could read it as, maybe you could read it as among my father's people, although I think that might be pushing it a little bit. Mm-hmm. Or you could read it as, like, in the place where... Space. Yeah, in my father's space. Mm-hmm. And so that's how you get to my father's house there. Mm-hmm. And I think that's interesting and important resonance. But it's not as clear in the text in the Greek as it is in the King James, actually, does better here, which is not often the case with the King James. But in my father's affairs, I think, is what the King James says, or something along those lines. Mm-hmm. which captures that ambiguity a little bit.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a really important note. I mean, it's hard for me sometimes reading the Gospels when there are these scenes where Jesus is so personally loved by the people around him and everyone is so like totally all in, and then he speaks to them in a way that they can't understand.
Yes.
And it makes me kind of mad. Like, why would you do that to people?
Yeah.
So I was sitting with it this morning and trying to think, I don't know, maybe because I was thinking about sort of brain development and child development and adolescent development, but I started to think of it as like when you're teaching a small child, or even like teaching language to someone that you don't have other language to explain what you mean. You just have to keep using words and showing them that's what this word means. And eventually they will come to associate, you know, that symbolic set of sounds that you've made with whatever it was you wanted it to mean. But there's no easy way to go through that. It like necessarily involves a long period of time where you are saying things and they don't understand.
No, I mean, it's right. Like it's just hard to think outside of your paradigm.
Yes.
And that's what Jesus is, I mean, all the way through. And this is the first, by the way, these are the first words of Jesus in the gospel, which, makes sense when you think about it. Because he's been a baby this whole time. Yeah. But we're almost 3 chapters in, or almost into the 3rd chapter. And so you can miss the fact that this is the first thing Jesus ever says. Mm-hmm. But this is the thing he struggles with the whole rest of the gospel, right? Is he is trying to talk about a way of framing the world, which is a different way than the world is framed by everybody he ever talks to. I think that's exactly right. I love the way you've said that. And so he doesn't, like, there's not the language. It doesn't communicate. Like, once we get in a worldview and people try to tell us something that doesn't fit in our worldview, like, we have lots of defense mechanisms that, like, things just bounce off because we can't just reorient our whole world. And this seems like the beginning of that process, maybe, where Mary and Joseph, who even, like, I mean, they've had an angelic experience, or at least Mary has, sort of announcing this thing, and they still can't get their heads around it. Mm-hmm. I like that, like, Jesus just doesn't know how to talk to them about it.
Yeah, and it really, I mean, again, looking developmentally at what it looks like to move through this period of life, at least in the modern period, it really is a time where your parents have their expectations of you, but there are other expectations too that you might understand that your parents might not understand. And so, like, when you were talking about being 12 and understanding these different sort of like social expectations and responsibilities, this is, Jesus had a whole other set of them to deal with here. But there really is this moment of tension with parents where the parents realize that your world has gotten bigger than them.
Yeah. That's really well said.
There's a book that I really like about parenting through this period of time in a child's life. And the book is written from a Jewish perspective. It's called The Blessing of a B-, and it's by Wendy Mogul. And an analogy that she uses that I really comes to my mind, really at least once a week now, is that we're teaching our child to swim, and we are the side of the pool. And so they hold on to the parents on the side of the pool for a while, and then they push off it really hard. And then they get tired and they come back and hold on to it. And then they push off again. And like the experience of like trying to be there and be solid and off, and also being kicked all the time, of course, all the more so for Mary, who's not raising your typical child. But then I really love that the text comes back and says, and then after this, Jesus went home with them and was obedient. It's not like he pushed off and he was done. Yeah. Because that's really developmentally like what that age is. You don't push off once and you're done. You push off and then you come back. But it is sort of like preparing the way, as you've said, to be able to let them go again. All the more so if you happen to be raising the Messiah. But even on a smaller scale, I think for just your human tweens.
Yeah, I think that's important that Jesus has sort of come into his own here in the temple, but that does not mean he has suddenly become, he's demonstrated that he has authority in the tradition, but his authority has not overtaken the authority of his family structure and the traditional structure. Like, he is still part of that tradition. He's still part of that family. He's still obedient to Joseph, presumably, even though Joseph is not his real father, you know. So there's something in there about how Jesus is able to or needs to remain a part of the structures that raised him, or still are raising him, even though everybody now has recognized that he's more than your typical kid.
Yeah.
This line in verse 51, his mother cherished every word in her heart. That takes you back to the side of the manger, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Any thoughts about that connection?
I think I just see Mary throughout these stories as encountering all kinds of things that she knows she can't really wrap her head around. Like, she knows she doesn't understand them. She knows that they're important. And that's just, I guess that's what you do with something that you can't hold it in your head quite. You don't know how to change your actions in response to it, but you know it's important. I don't know. What would you pull out anything specific from that connection?
No, I love where you're going with that. I think for me it may be a little bit related to what I was saying earlier about it's been 12 years. Mm-hmm. And so, you know, the reader kind of experiences this flashback to the first night of Jesus's life. Yeah. And maybe that Mary is also in some sense sort of flashing back, like connecting these experiences and saying, this thing that seemed so immediate 12 years ago has sort of faded in my experience, but now this new thing connects all that back and calls it back to the fore of her mind. Mm-hmm. So this is sort of a completion of something that started way back when, or a continuation of it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. All right, friend. It's that time again. We've come to the end of our text. What message might you pull out for our communities today?
This is not exactly where I thought I was going to end up, but what I'm thinking about is I'm really struck by the role of the teachers in the temple, who are not even really necessarily characters in this text. You know what I mean? But this image in verses 46 and 47, where Jesus is sitting among the teachers for several days and talking to them and asking questions and answering them. And there is something about that is really sticking with me, of these, you know, these adults who are highly trained. Like, this is what they do. They sit around, they wrestle with the tradition. And here's this 12-year-old kid who, I mean, granted, is demonstrating extraordinary abilities. But the fact that they welcome him to come and sit with them and like hold forth and to put questions to them and to answer questions in ways that amaze the crowd, and that they seem to be encouraging him. I mean, they're at least welcoming him and sort of encouraging his development. And I just think that's such a remarkable testament to the leadership and the lack of ego and the desire to like raise up the next generation. Not, it seems like in a patronizing way, like, oh, you're such a cute little kid. Like, let's see if you can answer questions. But like taking this 12-year-old seriously as a conversation partner and somebody they can talk to and learn from and answer questions from. I just think that's such a remarkable example of what a community can do for a young person and what a young person can do for a community. Mm-hmm. And I really love that as an example for contemporary communities of the role of young people and the responsibility that we have for young people about, you know, acknowledging their status in our communities and helping to raise them up and not, you know, being so entrenched in our own positions that we can't allow new ideas, we can't allow questions to be put to us. I just really love that, the nurturing of the teachers in this text. It is, of course, going to go in a different direction later on in the gospel. Yeah. When Jesus is going to kind of outgrow the tradition, and people are going to have to deal with that. Yeah. But right here in this moment, and even knowing that that's coming, to say these teachers were willing to help this kid develop and take him seriously so that he could grow up and challenge the very tradition that he's learning from. I think there's something really remarkable about that for us.
I love the way you've put that. And I love it especially because of the contrast that it is to the relationship that Jesus ultimately has with these folks later in the text. But that to underscore that there was this moment in their relationship where he was really interested in talking with them and learning from them, and they were really interested in talking with him and learning from him, and yeah, sort of all was right in the world in a way. But you're right. I mean, the message I was going to pull from the text is not so different, that we don't always take 12-year-olds so seriously.
Yeah.
And this feels like a corrective to that, and to enable a 12-year-old to begin to imagine and live into what it could look like to be a member of the community who is responsible for themselves is a real gift, and also, I don't know, maybe a requirement of our of our communities. You know, in my work with this age group, I find that it's an age where many young people could naturally part ways with a tradition because they're differentiating from their parents, and they associate their parents with the tradition, and because the ways that they learned texts in like second grade probably don't work for them anymore. Their brain is a very different place. Their life is much more complex, and whatever concrete images they may have of God from stories or from the concrete thinking of early childhood don't work for them anymore. And so the options are for them to step away and say, that was something from my childhood, it's silly, or for us to really let them have a space where it can be as complex as they need it to be, understanding that their opinions will change over time, as ours probably will, but it really does require a different mindset to not talk to them like young children who are concrete thinkers and adorable and controllable.
Yeah.
Let them be a little bit uncontrolled.
Yeah.
But also not expect them to be able to think about the text just in the same way that an adult would think about it. I mean, they don't have frontal lobes yet, you know, so
Yeah.
they're limited in that capacity. I think this text offers a really beautiful way to think about engaging our tweens and teens.
I love that. And I love the way that you talked about that a little bit ago as the swimming lessons, like pushing off and then coming back and noticing that Jesus differentiates here, but then goes home and is obedient. And so allowing both of those things to be true. And, you know, when Jesus is pushing away, there is something that important there that's happening for him. And then when he comes home, there's something important there that's happening for him too. And so learning how to like let both of those things be okay is important to that process. I love that.
Yeah, and again, like going back to right where we started, I love that Luke includes this story, this sort of liminal moment when Jesus is not an adorable, passive baby and is also not an adult who speaks with complete authority and independence. He's in between.
Yeah. All right, Amy, so next time we're going to be in Luke chapter 3 in the story of Jesus' baptism, where his sort of transition to an adult is going to really take place, I guess.
Yeah.
And so this development is going to shift into his actual ministry beginning in Luke 3.
Sounds good. I look forward to it.
Me too. I'll
See you then.
Talk to you next time.
Bye. Thanks for joining us for this episode of BibleWorm. If you'd like to hear the rest of our conversation about this text, join our Patreon at the extended worm level or higher to get access to extended episodes. You'll also find other goodies like early access, video lectures, weekly liturgies, and more, starting at just $4 per month. Visit patreon.com/BibleWorm podcast for details.
BibleWorm is produced by Bobby Williamson and edited by Joel and Laura Becker. Our theme song is sung by Colin Bagby. We are grateful to all our supporters for helping us keep the podcast going. A special thank you to our executive producer, Fox Valley Presbyterian Church in Geneva, Illinois.
Join us again next week when we'll be discussing Luke chapter 3, verses 1 to 22. Until then, keep on digging.